Welcome to Creative Tien channel. Today we want to use knitting machine LK150 to make another mitten with the convertible flap on the top and the cable pattern in the back. It will be more flexible and practical. I based on the short row mitten we did last time. I will put a link somewhere. Last time we start with left 18 to the right 19 every other needle. So the total stitch will be 37 stitch and half of that is 18 stitch plus 1 stitch. So on one side it's about 18 stitch. So the location of the cable will be centered on the 18 stitch. This 18, that's another 18. And we'll need the two symmetrical gloves or mitten to make a pair. And since we have 18 stitch and I want to do the 3 by 3 cable crossing, so we have 6 stitches in the middle and we'll drop 1 stitch on both sides. So it will be 5 stitch, 1 stitch, 6 stitch, 1 stitch and 5 stitches. That's the 18 stitches. For the row count of the cable, after the cuff, I will start with 6 plain rows and do a cable, and then 7 rows, do a cable, and continue several times. And on the third 7 rows, after I do the cable crossing, I will start to bind off on this side. Or you can take it off on waist yarn if you want live stitches. And then we can continue do 1 more 7 rows and then do another cable crossing, and then we'll do the short row on the top. After the short row we will do 7 more rows so it comes back to this area to match the other side. For the yarn I use Lion brand wool ease, or you can use any worsted weight yarn. For the tension I have number 5 on the mast, and I will just keep it simple, use number 5 on the carriage. And for the Caston, I keep it the same as my blue short row mitten, starting from the left 18 every other needle until the right 19. And the empty needle will go to the non-working position. And the carriage is set to plain knitting. And I will start with the E-Rock Caston, the same as my last project, and do a mark ribbon. After the E-Wrap, I will hang some weight and then start knitting 30 rows. And make sure the right side, you don't catch the yarn like that, that will cause problems. So the yarn is not caught in the hook here. Now we knit 30 rows and we will re-hand it back to the machine. And the carriage setting is to just plain knitting. So after I knit 30 rows, I will take off the weight and I can fold in half and hand the stitches back to the empty needle. I will pick up the edge stitch first and hand it back to the empty needle. We'll pick up the upside down V and hand it to the empty needle. Here the upside down V. Hand it to the next empty needle. And you can pull the needles out after you're done. You will make the next row much easier to knit. And we just continue going all the way. So after you hand it back, you can see the mark ribbon. And the next row will be tight, so I'm just going to increase the tension by 1. So now I have 5, I can go to 6 and knit 1 row. I'll pull this down just in case it gets loose. Okay, after this row I will put the tension back to 5. And I will put some weight and start knitting the middle part. I'm going to try to knit this one first. So the cable pattern will be on the left side, and the thumb will be on the right. So we will start by knitting 6 plain rows, like this diagram here. And then on the left side, it will be this part, the 18 stitches. And don't forget the drop stitch. We'll find out the location of those 6 cable stitches, and outside of that 6 stitch, we'll drop those 2 stitch. It's not really dropping, we'll just transfer that stitch to the next needle outside of the cable stitches. 5 stitches, we'll drop 1 stitch. I will take this stitch out and transfer to the 5th stitch. So this one is out of work. We'll put it back to the A position so you don't knit it by accident. And then 6 stitch, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The next stitch we are going to transfer it. I'm going to transfer it away from the cable stitch. And then take the needle, place back to the non-working position. Now we figure out our cable stitches, we can start to knit 6 rows. I always try to keep the yarn loose at the end by pulling it so it doesn't get too tight. Now we have 6 rows, and you can see the area with cable. Outside the cable, that's the drop stitch. It will create a nice background for the cable stitches. So the next thing, we have to cross the cable stitches. And since we have 6 stitches, I will use the 3-prong tool, 2 of the 3-prong tool. Just take the right 3 stitches on one tool and the other 3 stitches on the other tool. And then we cross it. You can cross any way you want, right to the left first or left to the right first. To me, it seems easier to cross the right to the left first. So I will keep it that way for this project. And you can use your finger to help. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to manipulate the stitches. Okay, now the left 3 stitches go through the right. Use your finger to help. Okay, now it's crossed. That's the first cable crossing. And it's a good idea to push all the needles out to the D position because cable is very tight and it can jump out of the needle easily. And one more thing is the location of the thumb hole. Before we have 15 rows here, after the cuff we have 15 rows and start the thumb hole. And now since we have to consider the cable stitch, we have 7 row plus 6 row. After the 7 row, we do the cable crossing, and then 1 more row we'll do the thumb hole. So the thumb hole is actually 14 rows from the cuff instead of 15 rows. So this will be 14 rows. Now we just did the 6 rows and the first cable crossing. We are going to need 7 more rows and do another cable crossing. That's another 7 rows. We'll do another cable crossing here. We'll do it the same way. Take off the 3 stitches with 1 tool and another 3 stitch with a second tool, and just switch the location. It might get a little tight, So it's better to use yarn with wool content, and don't use anything like cotton yarns. That will be very stiff for the cable. And according to our chart, I will do one more row and then I will start the thumb shaping. And now we are going to do the thumb hole. And according to the chart, when the cable is on one side, the thumb hole is on the other side. So the same as last time, I will just use a piece of waste yarn and then thread it on a needle. And I take it off the first 8 stitches. Okay, that's 8 stitches. I'll thread it through. Now it's on the waste yarn, so we can pick up the stitch later. And for the rest of the stitches, I'm going to cut another piece of yarn and start casting on. I have a piece of the same yarn from the other side of the ball. And for these 8 stitches, I will just do a simple E-wrap. Push it to the back. Okay, now the thumb hole is ready. We can continue. And we are supposed to do every 7 rows. And we just did 1 row before the thumb hole, so we have 6 more rows to go. So we will need 6 rows. And actually for this row I can pull out all of the stitches, because this new Caston, I'm not sure how well it knits, so just to be on the safe side. And then everything is set to plain knitting and knit 6 rows. The last 3 stitches didn't knit properly, so no problem, we'll knit this row by hand. Okay, so this row is knitted, and I like to add some weight here. You can use this weight to hang it, or this one I like, it's heavier. And we continue knitting our 6 rows. Now we already have 1 row. Okay, so after 6 rows we can do another cable crossing here and knit 7 rows and then another cable crossing. I just did another cable crossing and I will knit 7 rows. So I did another 7 rows. I will do the 4th cable crossing, and then you can see our chart. 1, 2, 3, 4. After the 4th cable crossing, we can start to separate the sides, and you can place it on the waste yarn for half of the stitches, or you can just bind off. So I will do the cable crossing and I will knit 1 row, and then I will start to bind off half of the stitches. Actually, I'm doing this one first. So I'm going to bind off the right side and then we'll continue the other side. So I just cross the cable again. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to knit 1 row and start taking off the other side on the waste yarn, or you can bind off. So I cut a piece of the yarn, maybe 3 or 4 times the length of the right side, and I'm going to do a sewing bind off. I will start from the right side, you know, the one I always do with 2 stitch forward, 1 stitch back, 2 stitch forward, 1 stitch back, and then go back to the first stitch, front to the back, and I can take off the first needle for first stitch and then repeat. And I will keep going until it goes to the 0. until it goes to the 0 in the center. So that's the bind of the half stitches. That's here. We still have the last 7 stitches to go, and then after that we'll do a cable crossing and then 1 more row, and then we'll start the show row. So we did this bind off after the first row, 1 row after the cable crossing, so we have 6 rows to go. 6 row and then cable crossing. So we need 6 rows on this side only. And we'll do 1 cable crossing. So I need 6 rows and 1 last cable crossing, and I will need 1 more row and then start my regular short row. Usually we short row until 1/3 of stitches, and since we have 5 here, 5 here, and the 6 is the middle, I will probably include the 1 that's drop stitch here, so make it 6, 6 and 6. And don't forget to change Russell lever to 1 on both sides, and then we can start by pulling the first needle near the carriage all the way out. And remember, you will need a lot of weight in the center soon, so I will just try to hold it down with my finger. Now we did the 5 on each side. I will start using the one that's in the non-working position and just continue the 6th stitch. And do the same on the other side. So it will be 6, 6, 6. Now we'll do the reverse show row. The one I like to do is just to place the yarn below the first needle that's near the carriage side and pull it back until it's a little bit open here. And make sure you pull down the center. And then we repeat it on the other side. Now the show row only goes to the curving part. We need to knit another 7 rows to match this area. And remember to put the Russell lever back to the plain knitting and knit 7 more rows. Okay, now we can place it on the waist yarn and take it off the machine, or you can just bind off from here. I'm going to just use the same sewing bind off, so you can cut the yarn leaving a tail that's long enough and sew this back from left to the right, 2 stitch forward, 1 stitch back, the same way. I'm going to start from the left side, so the 2nd stitch. Let's start from the 2nd stitch from the back to the front. Pull it tight, and then the 1st stitch front to the back. And then take off the 1st stitch, and we just keep repeating the 2nd stitch back to the front, the 1st stitch front to the back, and then take it off. So that's what it looks like. You see the cable and the show roll in the back here, and that's the back side. So we just have to finish by sewing up the sides. So I sew up the side seam. I start from the cuff from inside and then go outside, go all the way to the top. So that's what it looks like. You only have a big opening in the middle and the thumb hole. And next I'm just going to pick up the stitch around the thumb hole. We'll need a few rows of ribbon. I use a circular knitting needle and pick up those 8 stitches on the waist yarn, and I will pick up 1 stitch here and then 8 stitch here and 1 stitch on the sides, so it will prevent holes in the corner. So I have 9 stitches on each needle, and I do 1 by 1 ribbon for about 1.5 inches or almost 2 inches. And then I'm just going to bind off with a sewing bind off the same way as before. Now I finished the thumb. I just need to finish up the opening part. And I think the best looking way will be just knit a few rows of the ribbon. I can pick up the stitch here, knit maybe 3 to 5 rows of the 1 by 1 ribbon, and sew the edges to the inside. And then we'll pick up the top part. Again, we'll do a few rows of 1 by 1 ribbon and sew up on the sides and on top of it. So you'll be overlapping the ribbon. So I attach yarns at the end and then pick up stitches. After 2 or 3 rows of ribbon, I'm doing the same bind off. The second stitch going forward, and then the first stitch going backward, going front to the back. Take it off the needle. So that's what it looks like. Here's a cable and a ribbon thumb. Here is a palm side, and I can open it up like that. I can also make a button and attach here so it stays open. So thank you for watching today, and see you next week.